Right, well, I'm really sorry, I'm a bit late. My camera was playing games, and all you were going to see is the window behind me. This is the infant feeding Facebook live sessions, and I'm hoping lots of people will join me because it's just me on my own. Naomi's having a few weeks off, and I'm hoping you've got loads and loads of questions for me to fill the gaps, because Naomi's very good at keeping the chat going. So I'm just checking to see if anybody's joining us. Nobody coming up as yet. There was me rushing. They probably all thought I wasn't going to come because I am late, but my camera was playing up. Well, hopefully people will start to join and start asking me some questions. That would be brilliant, because it's always difficult when you're on your own. Filling gaps, brilliant. I can see some faces coming up now. That makes me feel much less lonely. It is pretty grim talking to a camera on your own. But, so I'm Alex, I'm from the infant feeding team. This is our weekly sessions. We've missed a few, coming up to 2 years though. So it's just me on my own for a few weeks. So dig deep, think of some lovely questions that you can ask me. Those questions that you think, that's a bit silly, but you know what, if you're thinking that everybody else is too. I'm pulling out my box of goodies here. So just looking to see if we've gone live, and I can just see if you send me any questions. Yes, it's on, I can see it now. Brilliant. Now you put your questions through and I'll be able to see them. Thought I'd have a quick chat about documentation now. I know I've talked about that before. I'm just going to have a look, see what I've got with me, make sure I brought it all. It's been a busy morning. I've been in clinic this morning and on the wards. Got some lovely mums. I met a mum this morning who's been doing a most amazing job with hand expressing. So she'd watched these sessions and she'd got on with hand expressing before she came in, and she's got a stack of milk at home, stack of colostrum, so she's done an absolutely fantastic job. Now we say it every time on these sessions, you don't have to express before you have your baby. There's no obligation. It's recommended if you've got any risk factors, but it is a good skill to learn before you have your baby. So have a go, just have, see how you get on. It's one of those skills that it's easier to learn something before you're put in a position where you're tired, baby's here, you need something now. So from that point of view, it's really good. I can see questions coming through, but I'm just going to quickly talk about the blue notes. So any of you who haven't yet had your babies, there is a page about feeding in here that your midwife will go through with you. So if you flick through your notes, so you've got your page where you've written all your own details in. And anybody who's not in this area, this is what our notes look like. We talk about them as our blue notes. And if you skip on through, you'll go past that first page, then you go past the page that talks about all your appointments that are here, your list of appointments. Then you have your pull-out page where all the details of each appointment is written down. Then we have your Tommy's feeling your baby move, because it's important that you do feel your baby move, because the kicks really do count. And then we have a section about planning the place of birth. And then this maroony page here, just behind, is the feeding page, and this should be completed with your midwife. So have a look at it, maybe before an appointment, and have a chat with her about when she's going to be completing it with you. It's usually by 34 weeks, and it's meant to be a discussion about your thoughts about feeding. It's not, as we say on these sessions every week, week in, week out, we're not here to tell you how to feed. We're here to support you with whatever decision you make. But you need to make a decision with all the information, and this is a beginning of a discussion about feeding, and it allows you to have that discussion with your midwife. So it's thinking about planning a warm welcome for your baby. So that's thinking about being skin to skin, visualising your baby before they come, being ready for them really. Responsive parenting from birth is the next section down here. And that's just being, we need to respond to our babies. They've got no idea about waiting. They've got no idea about hunger, and we need to be there for them. And that all helps, with their development. And then feeding is the last part of it. So that all comes together regardless of how you're feeding. And it's here, have a quick chat about feeding. So that's the page in your books. I'm just going to move on to the questions, and then that probably lead to other things to talk about. Let's have a look to see who's been already messaging, and thank you so much for not holding back and just getting in there. So Vicky has put, my boy is 8 weeks old and is really struggling with trap wind at night. So when I feed him, she's breastfeeding, he starts off quite aggressively and stop starts, I think because he's uncomfortable. whoops, it skipped down. I think another message came in underneath. Right, and I can hear the bubbles building up in his tummy when he's swallowing, which isn't helping with the wind and is also making him quite sick after a feed. I do wind him part way through, but is there anything else I can do to help? Our feeding was going really well. He put on 3 pounds on from birth at 6 weeks, but I'm now starting to find it stressful. Thank you. Now, I know I say this every time, but take yourself along to the Abingdon Breastfeeding Cafe, or go and have a chat with Oxfordshire Breastfeeding Support. Just get them to check your positioning and attachment. And I know I go on and on about it, but we know that positioning and attachment is the cause of many, many problems. Now, I'm sure obviously you've done brilliantly, but what sometimes we don't allow for is a baby to grow. So when you have a baby that's been a little baby, you've had them plonked in front of you. But once they become a bigger baby, which if your baby's growing at that speed, they will be, then we need to remember not to have them here, but to actually bring them round so that they're still starting nose to nipple. The temptation is that you have your small baby here and you have your bigger baby here, but actually we want your small baby here and your bigger baby here for feeding. So that can be a very simple change, and I know that it might sound mad to be saying this might be why you're struggling, but if you think about how important it is to get that really big mouthful of breast in the mouth. I don't want that one, I'm looking for a better breast than that one. This one I'll do. So thinking about getting that really big mouthful of breast in the mouth so that it's right in here and the baby milks the breast. If the baby can't, because they're now coming on centrally, so they're coming on like this as opposed to this, because they're here rather than here, then we end up with a situation where the baby doesn't milk the breast as well as they could do. And they can end up with an overbalance of too much sugary milk, which is frothy in their tummies, give them wind, makes them feel uncomfortable, means they keep coming back for more and more food because they're uncomfortable, so they want to suck because it makes them feel better, which self-perpetuates it because they end up with more sugary food. So you end up with this baby that's looking for lots of food, gaining weight, but is very unsettled, unhappy and windy. And that can come from just not maybe moving your baby round when they've grown, as opposed to bang slap in front of you. It could be as simple as that, Vicky, but it would be well worth going and having a chat with someone who knows what they're talking about. So the wonderful team at Oxfordshire Breastfeeding Support or at Abingdon Breastfeeding Cafe, either of those two groups would be really superb at helping you. I think obviously at 8 weeks it's a bit difficult because from a midwifery point of view that we're not in a position to give you help with that, but that really might be well worth it. It would be such a shame, Vicky, when you've done such a great job, your baby has grown so well, you've obviously got loads and loads of milk, for you to find it stressful and then to put pressure on you for feeding. So you've done a great job. I would just go and get some support with positioning attachment, but even before that, think, am I starting nose to nipple? Or am I bringing my baby a bit more centrally so the breast is going into the middle of the mouth? Have a quick peek and see what you're doing and come back to us. Kimberly has said her baby is 7.5 months. We've gone from 8 weeks to 7.5 months at our older baby. I'm breastfeeding and she's now weaning 3 meals a day. Recently at night she's waking 4 to 6 times and wanting to feed. Is it comfort feeding, and what's the best way to stop this? I've tried a dummy which worked at first, but now it doesn't. Probably suggest, Kimberly, that you increase the amount of milk you're giving in the day as well, because remember, and I'm sure Alicia will be, Charlotte will be on here with her lovely Alicia, will be reminding us as well. Food before 1 is just for fun. So the majority of the calories that your baby is getting at 7 months is still from you. So make sure you're starting with a breastfeed and then offering other foods, and that you're slotting in as many breastfeeds as you can in the day. So if you can front load the day, you might find the nights are slightly better. It's really common that babies start to may rouse, and it's from that point of view, we often see it actually just as they're coming to the weaning point that they're looking for a bit more food. So thinking about offering a bit more in the day may help your nights, may help your baby to go a bit longer at night. Some parents like to do dream feeds, and that can work very well for some parents. As they go to bed, they pick the baby up and give them a feed whilst they're pretty much asleep, and that just front loads them over the night to get get a bit more in their tummies to keep them going. But at this point in time, I think the main thing to remember is your milk is the majority of the nutrients that your baby's getting. The nutrition is coming from your milk, and the solid foods that you're offering are additional, but they're not the main source of nutrition for your baby really until about 1 year of age. So I you know, see how you get on. Try adding in a few more feeds in the day. Make sure you're starting with breastfeeds before you're offering other foods as well, because it might be you're displacing breast milk when the baby needed that as well. So good luck with that. Health visitors as well. Your health visitors should be able to help, as they are, you know, they're the experts when it comes to introducing solid foods, because that's very much their bread and butter, so they may be able to help. And you know, there are some great resources out there if you go and have a look on. First Steps Nutrition is a fabulous resource, not just for people who are formula feeding, because it's a lot about formula feeding, but it also has a huge section on additional foods, so complementary foods. So First Steps Nutrition is a really good website to have a quick look at. I can see messages coming in thick and fast. You've taken me seriously. Thank you very much. So Kimberly, I hope that's given you a few things to think about. You mentioned about comfort feeding. Obviously, feeding is a little bit about comfort too. I wonder, you know, maybe are you back at work? You know, is your baby not seeing quite so much of you? You know, that often happens. We find babies wake a bit more. See how you get on anyway, and let us know if we can support you any further. Charlotte's come on and said, hi Alex, hope you're well. I recognise that folder after having Alicia. I do miss the kicks in my stomach. Alicia is asleep, so I'm having some mum time at the moment. So yeah, lovely. Enjoy a few minutes on your own. Yeah, those blue notes I think bring back some very good memories for many women. Vicky's come back and said, thank you. Thanks, Vicky. Courtney has said, I'm planning on breastfeeding, however, I'd like to feed out of a bottle when out in public and normal breastfeed at home. Do you think this is doable? Yes, I do think it's doable. Many mums do it. However, I would suggest that you start with breastfeeding. Get breastfeeding established for the first couple of weeks. You know, get going with that. Get your baby to learn how to breastfeed, and then you can introduce the bottle. Sometimes we do introduce the bottle a bit sooner than that, but try not to do it too early, because we need babies to learn how to, you know, to really get breastfeeding going, and then the bottle feeding come in. You know, it's totally up to you how you do it. The fact that your baby's going to be getting your milk is absolutely brilliant, you know, and that's what we would want for all babies, that they can get as much of your milk as possible. And there are many mums out there who are breastfeeding and having to give bottles, and that may have formula in it, but we're still going to maximise on the fact that they're getting their mother's milk, which is unique. I know we say this on these sessions very often, but the milk that you make is totally different to the milk of another mother. Your milk is absolutely bespoke for your baby. We've had a few babies on the wards recently who've been a little bit early, so 35 weekers for instance. So rather than being born at sort of 37 plus, they've arrived at 35. The milk that those mothers make is different to the milk they would have made if their baby had been born at term. And it's thought that the body is compensating. It's aware that this baby has arrived early, and it's putting additional products into the milk to compensate for what the baby's missed out on from being in the tummy, in the mum's tummy. So for instance, the main thing that's a big difference is that there are more long chain fatty acids, and long chain fatty acids are which help develop the brain development and the eye development. So the baby is not being shortchanged because they've been born early. The mum's milk is compensating and giving that baby more of those products, those long chain fatty acids, that it needs to have good eye development and good brain development. So, you know, our milk is amazing in that respect, and it's constantly changing from the day the baby's born to the day that our mother stops feeding. It's constantly changing to meet the baby's needs. To Courtney, yes, absolutely, totally doable. Yes, you can breastfeed. Yes, you could be bottle feeding as well. The majority of the babies cope, but do make sure you have a good supply. Babies like flow. They like milk coming. They don't want to be waiting for it. So, you know, women who struggle with a low milk supply, and then the babies start to get a bottle and the milk's coming quite readily, those babies sometimes get a bit antsy because they're a bit like, well, where's the milk? It's not coming quick enough. So ensure you've got a good milk supply, and then introduce the bottle, get it going well. That was for Courtney, so good news on that one. Jessica has said, "Hi Alex, thank you for these chats. I had my little boy on the 15th. Way, we've been 2 weeks old. We've been exclusively breastfeeding. Our little boy is sadly being referred to the prolonged jaundice clinic in a few weeks after having a phototherapy, and although his levels initially went down, they've slightly come up. I've heard breast milk can contribute to him being able to remove bilirubin as quickly. Is it worth giving formula as well to assist?" It's the volume of milk going through, and what happens with bilirubin is we want the bilirubin to stick to the fats in the milk. So if you can keep the volume of milk going through your baby up, then that really helps to clear jaundice. So ensuring your baby is getting enough food makes a really big difference to how quickly a baby clears the jaundice levels. So if your baby is not growing quite as quickly as we wanted, then giving more food will help. Obviously, the first preference will always be your breast milk. That's what we would always hope for. You know, we would, if you can express and get more milk into your baby that way, that would be absolutely ideal. If that's not feasible and you really can't do it, then giving some formula might be what's required. You know, we're looking for babies to be growing. I think you said you were a little boy, you did. You know, we're looking for him to be gaining from day 5 onwards, somewhere in the region of the upper 20s, lower 30 grams per day. And if he's not gaining quite quickly enough, then that will be contributing to jaundice, which is why we would be suggesting a bit more food. From our point of view, ideally it's your milk if that's possible, and that's where pumping might come in. If you need to, you know, as you're under 6 weeks, you would fall within our remit still, and if you need some more support, in fact actually we don't mind how old your baby is. If you want to give us a call, we'll talk to you for any age, but to see you in clinic we need you to be under 6 weeks, unfortunately, because after that the remit goes to the health visitors. So I think yes, more food will help, ideally your food, Jessica, your milk. If that's not feasible, then formula might do the job too. Courtney's come back and said, obviously a nipple is different to a bottle. Absolutely, but babies can be very clever and they can work it out, and most babies can cope, but it's the flow that they struggle with. As I mentioned, if you haven't got enough milk, then the baby goes on and they might have a go, and then they go, but it's not coming. Why am I here? So they're sort of, this is where ensuring you have a really good milk supply is going to be a really good way of keeping your baby breastfeeding, because they get the reward at the breast, and they will do both then, hopefully. Kimberly has said that made sense. That's really good news. So yeah, brilliant. So that was talking about weaning, wasn't it? I was just checking what we were chatting about there. So I hope that helps as well. Anybody else is on the verge of introducing solid foods. So it's 2 ways it's called. You'll often hear in the infant feeding world, we tend to call it introducing solid foods or complementary foods, and in other places you might hear it as weaning. So it's using, you know, either of those terms. They're fairly interchangeable these days, but it's introducing foods other than milk at that point in time. But it doesn't mean you stop breastfeeding or offering formula milk. Lauren has said, my 9-month-old is just not interested in solids. She's my 4th and I've never had this before. If she's still growing, then I wouldn't worry. She's going to be obviously seeing other children eating, so it won't be an issue. You know, some children take to it sooner rather than later. So I think just keep popping things in front of her. And you know, it's the whole thing about make them look fun, you know, sort of colourful stuff. Have her at the table with all your other children, because that can spark that interest in sort of putting things in her mouth and letting her do it. I think that's where baby-led weaning is so fantastic, rather than what Naomi and I ended up doing with our children, because we, you know, when our children were young, we were encouraged to give them other foods from the age of 3 months, which we now know is no use, because they can't actually get the benefit of the food. They're much better off being milk fed at that stage. So you know, this is why we recommend offering solid foods from 6 months onwards. But there's no time scale as such, Lauren. I think from the point of view of just popping things in front of her, make them fun, make them colourful. You know, a lot of bought foods are not colourful. So, you know, so sticks of veg that she can chew on, avocado that she can scrunch up, you know, fruit, veg, anything she can hold like that would be brilliant. Then let her do it at her own speed. Again, your health visitor should be able to support you with this too. But I think at 9 months, you know, we're not terrifically worried. She's going to have good jaw movement because she's breastfed. In the past, people used to worry about babies not getting on solid foods early on. They thought it would have, I remember my mother saying it, they thought they would have problems with speech. But actually, you watch a baby breastfeed, they've got such good jaw movement. We're not really worried. We're not worried about that at all anymore. So thinking about that, I think, make it fun. Get her in with the rest of the kids so she sees them all eating and she'll want to follow them, I would have thought. And if that's not working, have a quick chat with your health visitor and see what else they suggest. Courtney's just come back and said, brilliant. And she said, as a first-time mum to be, I'm not too sure on the collecting the milk thing. Do I collect in a few weeks before I'm due and freeze it? Should I leave it in the syringe that I collect it in? Right, so if you were wanting to collect colostrum before you have your baby, we would suggest you do it from 37 weeks onwards, no sooner. And I'm just going to see if I can find a syringe. And we do have syringes. I'm just looking now where a syringe is. Oh, there is one. So we use these sort of syringes. They're enteral, they're purple, that means they're for food syringes. This one's got a little bobble on the end, they don't all. But actually, colostrum is so thick and gloopy, yes, leave it in the syringe, so collect it. So what you would be doing is you would be hand expressing and trying to collect the colostrum at the same time. So you'd be there doing this, collecting. And you can draw it back with your finger. I don't know if you can see what I'm doing. You can see. So you can do it like that. You can get really dexterous. So I was supporting a mum yesterday, the one I mentioned earlier, who's done an absolutely brilliant job with her milk supply. And she was saying she was able to collect it on her own, which is fantastic if you can. Again, another reason for practicing before you have your baby. Learn how to collect your own colostrum so you don't need someone else with you. So just going through hand expressing, because you've raised it, Courtney, we would suggest that you do maybe a little bit of massage. Have a think about your baby. I know you haven't met your baby yet, but think, what's my baby going to be like? You know, are they going to have dark hair? Are they going to have light hair? What colour eyes are they? Are they going to look like you? Are they going to look like their partner, your partner? You know, start visualising them, because that will really help getting oxytocin flowing. Oxytocin is the hormone that releases the milk. It's a hormone that drives your labour, because it gets your uterus to contract, but it also contracts the cells in your breast that forces the milk down to the nipple to be collected. So oxytocin is a brilliant hormone. It's your feel-good hormone. It's a hormone that, you know, if you're stroking a dog or you're in a big cuddle, that's the one you're exuding. That's oxytocin. So having done a bit of massage, got a bit of oxytocin flowing, be somewhere warm, be somewhere someone no one's going to interrupt you. Make a C with your hand. Work your way back from the base of the nipple. Here you'll feel nothing. And then as you go back, you'll find that it feels lumpier and bumpier. One mummy recently described it to me as feeling like bubble wrap for her. But what you want is a firmness, that you can feel it's firm behind your fingers. I want you to then bring your fingers in as if they're going to meet. So you're going to bring them in and hold. And you're making your fingers meet like this as much as you can. So you're going to come in and hold and keep it, and let go. You want to feel the pressure going through the pad of your finger and your thumb. And you want it as if they're going to meet. So it's back from the nipple, find where it's lumpy and bumpy, anchor your finger and thumb, in and hold, and keep it. And you can see the nipple is in between my finger and thumb. And that's important. You don't want to be over here, because that's not going to do anything. You need to be either side like this. So in and hold, and the long hold is important. Release, go again, in and hold. Some people will be taught to go back and in, and that works too. So it would be here, back and in. So in and hold. Then you'll start to see if you do, you may, the first few times you do it, you may not get anything. Many women don't get anything for a few times, but once you do, you'll start to see it shining. It starts to glisten on the nipple, and then the glistens build up into little droplets, and then the droplets start collecting, get bigger and bigger, and that's when you collect it with this. And the reason that we use these is because the colostrum is so thick and gloopy. If you used a pump, you would just lose it. Just running under a pump it in. If you imagine having it in here, you wouldn't get it out. Whereas as each droplet collects, you can collect it off the nipple with the syringe. So that's what we're doing. So if you need some syringes, have a chat with your community midwife and see if she can get you some. I know some mums have got them on the internet as well. They just need to be just little syringes that then can go in the freezer. So if you start at 37 weeks, we don't know when your baby's going to be born, so collect them, pop them in the freezer. When you come in, do not bring too much with you. We have a real problem with colostrum going missing. The reason for that is that you might move around the hospital. So if you're coming in for an induction, you'll come in, you'll go to level 6. Then you go in, you know, then it's decided that, okay, you need to be on delivery suite because you need continuous support. So you then go down to level 2. You have your baby, and let's hope everything goes well. You'll go to level 5. If maybe you needed a bit of help, you needed a forceps delivery or ventouse, or you had a section, you'll go to observation area and then to level 5. So you can see there are many movements around the hospital, and in that process, sometimes colostrum goes missing. So we highly recommend that you bring in as little as possible. So just bring in a small amount, keep it in a cool bag with ice blocks, and try not to let it go. And maybe express, if you're being induced, express while you're being induced. You've got some lovely fresh colostrum to work with. So that's the thoughts of that. And Courtney, if you go on to the website, so if you do a search, OUH maternity feeding, so literally put those 3 things into a Google search, it will come up with our infant feeding page, and on our infant feeding page you'll find a link to some videos. Go down to resources and there's a link to some videos, and you'll see a video of a woman who is hand expressing. We had a fabulous mum who let me film her, and that baby must be now about 18 months, and she let me film her expressing because she was doing such a good job, and we wanted to make this video. So you can watch her hand expressing. And then we also have on that resources page a link to a leaflet called Collecting Colostrum When You're Pregnant, and so that talks you through exactly what you want to be doing. Now, one thing I didn't mention is I talked about anchoring, and when I say anchoring, I mean you're not sliding. No sliding coming forward like this. It is anchor. Imagine you're going to stick your thumb and your finger into the right spot, and that's where they stay on the skin. They do not move on the skin. What they do is move what's underneath. So if you watch that video with this mother who I filmed, you'll see that it looks like her fingers are coming forward, but actually her fingers are not moving on the skin. It's the tissue below that is moving. Have a look, you'll see what I mean. And it's really good video. Well, her video is, the rest of it's us, so it's not quite so good, but it'll do. All right, I'm going to scoot back, find the one I was on. So that was Courtney, wasn't it? Yes, Courtney. Thank you for that. Helen has said, I'm due on the 10th of April and I've managed to harvest 3 syringes of colostrum so far. Should I take the syringes into hospital with me or leave them at home in the freezer and get my husband to bring them in if they're needed? Well, I think I've just covered that. Ideally, how far away do you live? That's a big point. You know, if you live 10 minutes down the road, leave them at home. If you live a long way away, bring 1 in and leave 2 at home, because, you know, we can always get more in. And remember, you know, if you can do it now, you can do it after. You just get going. The thing to remember about it is, whilst we are talking to mums about collecting colostrum while they're pregnant, this is not going to impact on your supply. And I mentioned earlier about how important it is to establish a milk supply. What we are looking at is when your baby is born is the time when you make a difference to your supply. When everything you do before you have your baby makes no difference at all. It's what you do afterwards that makes a difference. So for instance, let's say you've collected a ton of colostrum, you bring it all in, you give it all to your baby, but you don't hand express. You are going to struggle with a milk supply. It is really important right from the beginning, when your baby is born, that you get on getting that milk moving. If your baby's going on and feeding well, you don't need to do anything. If your baby is struggling for one reason or another, because they're sleepy, they're jaundiced, you know, you might be separated, you need to be expressing as well as feeding. So, you know, from that point of view, everything you do after the baby is born makes a difference to your milk supply. And whether that's lots or little, it makes a difference. So if you do lots, you should have a good milk supply. If you don't do very much, you won't have a good milk supply. And it's as simple as that. So yes, Helen, bring one in, leave 2 at home, I think. And you might have more before then, because it can be the 10th of April. So bring a small amount in and leave the rest at home. Jessica said, thanks Alex, he's gaining weight really well and the midwives were really surprised. Ooh, that was exciting. That was about the jaundice, wasn't it? Okay, so we're not worried about that then. Brilliant, that's the best thing you can be doing. Again, talking about food in those early days, colostrum is a laxative and it makes the baby poo. It makes them poo out that meconium, that black sticky stuff that looks more like Marmite than anything else. That black meconium is full of bilirubin. Bilirubin is what makes babies jaundiced. Again, this is why it's important to get as much food in your babies in the first few days as possible, because what we're doing is getting rid of that bilirubin out of their gut and it prevents them getting jaundiced. So, you know, from that point of view, you know, we're actively encouraging to feed your baby as often as they're looking to be fed, and that you're, you know, if you're having any problems, that you back it up with hand expressing. So, but well done, Jessica, that he's gaining weight. I'm sure the midwives were delighted, because sometimes jaundice and poor weight gain don't go to, you know, they go together. So that you've bucked the trend on that one. Susie has said, hi Alex, following on from Courtney's question, does introducing formula and combination feeding affect your milk supply? We're at 4 months and have been exclusively breastfeeding relatively successfully, but I'm thinking of starting combination feeding with a couple of bottles a day, but I'm worried about whether this would affect my supply, but feel it may also be time to move to combi feeding. Also, would you have any advice on quantities of formula to give? Thanks, Susie. So the first thing I'll say is that, you know, we have the capacity to feed our babies for up to 6 months and beyond, and that's what's recommended, is exclusive breastfeeding up to 6 months. So you've got to 4, you're 2/3 the way. Do you think you could make it to the 6th? That would be brilliant. And maybe if you want to give a bottle, you could perhaps express in the morning. So many mums find they have more milk than they need in the morning, and then you could have a bottle for somebody else to give that could give you the opportunity to nip out the house or have an early night or whatever. I'm just thinking that, you know, there is no need to move on to formula unless you want to. And you're 2/3 the way there now to getting what the World Health Organization recommends, which is 6 months of exclusive breastfeeding gives the best health outcomes for babies. So if you can keep it going just a bit longer, you'd have done 6 months exclusivity, and that would be absolutely brilliant for your baby. If you were to introduce formula and you weren't expressing at that point in time that you were offering the formula, yes, your milk supply will go down, because it's all supply and demand. So your milk supply is driven by milk removal. So if you don't remove as much milk, then you're eventually not going to make as much milk. So the supply will go down. With regard to volumes, we look at stomach sizes of a baby from 1 month to 6 months of about 80 to 150, so somewhere in that ballpark. And like us, they don't eat the same amount at every meal. I don't know about you, but I quite often don't have a huge lunch, but I'll eat a lot more in the evening. I make up for it. And babies are the same. They'll have different feeds in the day. They'll have some feeds where they have more and some feeds where they have less. So being ready to, you know, if it's formula, then it's not the same as if you had to throw away your milk, but, you know, making up a bottle of 100 and 120 or so might be about right, and if you need to make up more, you make up more, but somewhere between 80 and 150 is a normal stomach size, so that might be a bit of a guide for you on volumes. But have a think about whether, you know, whether you could express, and that could be your milk instead, because that would still be exclusive breastfeeding, and you've done it up till now, which is so fab. So that's absolutely brilliant. There was a fabulous poster that was done by the NCT years ago, that was called Reasons to be Proud, and it's still around now, and it's so lovely. You know, whether you feed for a day or a week or a month or 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years, there's always a benefit for your baby, and it's incremental and it builds up. You know, those first feeds in the first few days, the colostrum feeds, if a mother only gives colostrum, then that's lined the baby's gut in a way that formula milk cannot. it's a bit like a protective layer in the baby's gut that stops bacteria going through and pathogens, things that are going to make your baby ill, or sensitize them to you know, sort of allergens. So, you know, even if your baby just gets colostrum, it's a really, really good start for babies. And WHO say this, the World Health Organization, that you know, if all babies could have some colostrum, then actually there would be much better health outcomes for babies throughout the world. Amazing, just from the colostrum. And it's chock-a-block full of every single antibody that you've ever made in all your life. You know, think about, you know, every bug you've had, whether you've had COVID or whatever, you're going to be producing those antibodies. Those antibodies are in your milk, in your colostrum, and it's like a baby's first vaccine. So if anybody's out there wavering, thinking about do I, don't I, even if you just give your colostrum, you've given your baby a really good start. So, okay, Susie, I'm going to move on. Courtney has said, oh, Courtney, you're keeping us going. Thank you. As a first-time mum to be, I'm confused on the whole collection of milk. Oh, I should. No, we did that. I should leave it in the syringe. I've done that one. I've jumped, obviously. But I think I've done that one. Should leave it in the syringe. I've answered that one. Sorry. Charlotte says, at the start when Alicia was born, she had a problem with gaining weight and kept going up and down, so I gave breast milk, formula. Now she's quite a chunky girl and heavy to pick up. I bet she is. And that is what some people have to do. You know, some people do, for one reason or other, don't produce quite enough breast milk for their babies. A lot of it is to do with what happens in the early days. We know that some mums have got a disposition, and we've had a call from these sessions because I did say this a little while ago, and this mum contacted us. You know, there are certain things that predispose mothers to maybe not having quite enough milk. Not definitely, but maybe. And it would be what we call a risk factor. So then we would be doing what we call belt and braces. We're going to really make sure that mother does everything to increase her supply. The sort of things we're looking at are mothers who maybe have hypothyroidism, mothers who have polycystic ovaries, mothers with diabetes, because that can impact in the first few days of milk production, mothers who have had fertility treatment, and mothers who've had any breast or chest surgery. So these sort of things can be a risk factor. Those are the things that we know about before a baby's born. When a baby's born, a mother who's had a really big postpartum hemorrhage, so lost a lot of blood at birth, that can put them on the back foot too. So what we do when we assess somebody, we ask them about all these things. You know, have you had any of these problems? It's always encouraging if you've had breast changes during pregnancy. So maybe you just got a little bit bigger, maybe you just felt a bit more tender. And some mums will say it's the first thing they noticed. Before they even knew they were pregnant, their breasts were tender, like that tenderness that you get just before your period starts. So, you know, from that point of view, these are things that we would be aware of. If a mother has no breast changes during pregnancy, none whatsoever, then we might be thinking, okay, do we need to be really supporting this mother to get things going well? You know, how are things going to go? So just a few thoughts there. Jessica's come back. He only lost 4.4% and then was above birth weight by day 10. I'll keep feeding. Well done you. Well, it's not food that's causing it then, but there are some babies that have prolonged jaundice and it isn't food. So well done. That's absolutely fantastic. Nice to be the one that bucks the trend. Lauren has said, yes, she's definitely not keen on puree, so I'm attempting baby-led weaning. She just isn't fussed. She's using her hands, feeling the foods, but never seems to put anything in her mouth. I'll keep trying. She's just so different to all my others. I'll contact the health visitor. Thanks. And you never know, there'll be something that will get her. There will be something that she'll think, oh, I want that, and she'll be off. So sounds like she's just gorgeous. Elle has said, as a first-time mum, I was planning on formula feeding from birth, but recently I've been thinking of breastfeeding. Would pumping and bottle feeding baby that way still be as beneficial? Absolutely, it would be brilliant.
Having your milk is wonderful. You lactating is brilliant. You know, your milk is going to protect your baby in a way that no other milk can. I've already mentioned about all the antibodies and things. Your human milk, our milk, is constantly changing to meet the baby's needs. And I mentioned earlier, you know, whether you're feeding, you know, so it's 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, it's constantly changing to do with your environment and what's going on, how old your baby is and what they need. And actually there are real benefits for you as a mom to be lactating. When mums have, you know, lactate, they feed their babies, regardless of whether it's a pump or a baby at the breast, then actually it protects you from 2 forms of cancer. So it protects you from cervical and breast cancer. It protects you from osteoporosis, which is, you know, something that happens because we all start losing bone density from about 35, 36 years old, and it is, you know, definitely associated with not breastfeeding. So mothers who don't breastfeed will lose bone density in a more acute way than women who do breastfeed. And the reason is that because through breastfeeding we redeposit calcium. We all lose calcium during pregnancy. We actually carry on losing during lactation, but actually when we stop feeding, our calcium levels peak. And what happens with a mother who chooses, you know, who for one reason or another is not breastfeeding, she's lost calcium during pregnancy. She then plateaus, and then she maybe has another baby, and then she loses again because she's formula fed, and then she plateaus again. So she doesn't get the peaks. Mothers who breastfeed get the peaks. So from your point of view, Elle, there are so many reasons to breastfeed. You give your baby your breast milk, whether you choose to do it via direct from the breast or in a bottle, it's still giving your baby milk. The World Health Organization talks about the order of nutrition for a baby. The first top of the list, as you can imagine, is breast milk from the mother. The next one is breast milk from a bottle or any other means, whether that's finger feeding, cup feeding, whatever. The next one down is donated breast milk, so i.e. still human milk, and the one, you know, that we would go to when we have to is formula feeding. So if you're thinking about, you know, is that something I could try, then give it a go. You know, think about, there are plenty of mothers who are out there who exclusively feed their babies breast milk from a bottle, and it will still have the health benefits for you and your baby. You can still think about keeping your baby close, which is part of breastfeeding as well. So having them close, excuse the thing in the bottle, so, and making sure that you brush for a gape, get the brush down the lips for a gape, keep eye contact, all the things that are so important with breastfeeding. You can still replicate much of it when you're bottle feeding. So if that's an option, then it would be well worth having a look at it. Have a look at some of our videos. We've got one video about pumping. You can have a look on there. When it's, as I mentioned earlier, when it's colostrum, we use hand expressing and syringes, and that's what you'd have to start with, is hand expressing and syringes, because using a pump at the early stages, it's just thick and gloopy, it gets lost in the pump, there's no point. But as soon as your milk starts to come in, you can start pumping. So think about maybe getting yourself a nice double pump. An electric double pump would be really beneficial, and there are some really good ones out there, and they're not all really expensive. Ardo, for instance, do a Calypso, which is a really good pump, and that retails at around the £100 mark. There's also Medela. They're slightly more expensive, but they're also very, very good. And there are some cheaper ones that, you know, that one particular called the Bella Baby has quite a small funnel. So this bit here where the nipple goes in is quite small. So if you imagine the nipple going into there. The Bella Baby is quite small. Although it's a very good price pump, it really doesn't suit a woman with a bigger nipple. So be careful what you buy. Whereas the Medela will come with a 24, which I think this one is. Oh no, it's 28, so that's a bit bigger. And the Ardo actually has a choice of kits, so they'll have 2 choices within the kits. But Ardo pump it is a very good pump. So it's a definite option, Elle, and you wouldn't be on your own. There are many, many women out there doing it. Some through choice, and some because actually their baby's never attached. So, and they'll do it. And I've known many mums get through the whole of those first 6 months to ensure that their babies get their milk for 6 months, this whole exclusive breastfeeding for the first 6 months. So give it a go. If you want any more information, get in touch with us. You can reach us by email or phone, and we can send you information about pumping and pumps if you want. Right, Courtney's come back and said thank you. Helen has said only live a 5-minute drive from the Wharton, so if you're having your baby there, you don't need to worry. So Neve has come on. Hello Neve, how are you? I'm harvesting more than I should need, but still have potentially 2 to 3 weeks to go. My question is, once I've stopped harvesting, can I stop, or is it advisable to carry on? Thank you. I don't think it matters actually, Neve. I think you can stop. It's not going to cause you any problems. It's not as if it's going to go on into mastitis, so I should think you would be absolutely fine. You know, if you've got loads, you could also contact Amanda and see if she'd have some of yours, depending on how much you've got. And we have got one mum who's donating at the moment, so she's got quite a lot. But congrats, Neve, that's really good news, really brilliant, and it's such a lovely thing to have. You know, having that colostrum, you know that you've got that buffer. You know that if should anything happen, should you feel very unwell after birth, should your baby have to go to the neonatal unit, you know, anything like that, you know you've got a way of feeding your baby, which is just so lovely. But yeah, congrats, Neve, that's really good news. We look forward to seeing you and your baby soon. Kezia has said, does giving formula milk along with breastfeeding? Oops, it's just jumped. There's another question that's come up. Oh, I've lost it. All right, it's jumped. Don't know what happened there. We're going to have to come back to Kezia, so I think I've lost her question somehow. Susie's just come back and said, thanks, Alex, that's really helpful and encouraging. And Kerry's gone, cow. Wow, what a comment. What a comment. Oh, okay, hope it was all right. Kezia said, what I meant, I don't want a huge baby. I'm going to find the first part of your question, Kezia. I've lost it. It seems to have disappeared. Could you put the rest of the question up for me? Because I can only see that lower bit now, Kezia. I seem to have lost it. I don't know if it's still up there. Let me just see if it's on the screen. It's not on my list here. Let me just have a quick peek. Excuse my finger. Ah, I just saw it. It's not showing on mine. I'm just going to refresh my screen, because I think on my laptop, because it's not showing all the questions. I don't think. I can see yours on there, but I can't see it on here. I saw it as a next one. Oh, it's playing games, I think, my computer today. Now let's see if I can see it on here. Bear with me. Just trying to find it, bear with me. It's further down. I think I might have missed a few. I'm really sorry if I've missed any questions, because I'm just looking now and I can see different ones. If I haven't answered your question, stick it up again so I can see it, because I think they're not coming through. I seem to get the same ones over and over again. It's not giving me different ones. Let me have a quick peek. Yeah, it's not giving me all my comments. Let's try a different way. Kezia, would you pop another one through if you want to ask the question, or you can give me a call if you want to, if you don't want to put it up. Leave me a minute. I've got an appointment after this, but after that I'll be free. And I can give you a call back. I can't see your question now. Let me just try again. Apologies for this. I don't know why I can't see the question. So, anybody else got any? Oh, I can see another one coming up. Oh, and that's one I haven't seen. Okay, right.
Kezia, if you'd like to pop a question through, you can give me a call if you want to, if you'd prefer to do so. Right, so Charlotte's popped one up. Hi Alex, bit of a silly question, but I'm not sure whether to give Alicia a cup of tea or warm chocolate for a different drink, as she loves milkshake juice also. It's interesting, isn't it? I don't think we tend to do tea here in the UK that much. I don't know. Maybe you've all seen something different. I lived in the Netherlands when I had my children. I had two of them here, but one in Holland, and it was quite standard to give children tea there. They all had tea, you know, a cup of tea with milk in it, which I always think of it as quite a grown-up drink. So I can't see. I don't know what implications there would be in giving tea. The only thing it might be caffeine, but then there's caffeine in chocolate too. I think that's very much up to you, and maybe a question to put to your health visitor, Charlotte. Maybe have a chat with your health visitor and see what she thinks. You can have a quick chat with them, so, and see what they say. Carla has said, my baby boy was born at 35+6 3 weeks ago. I'm breastfeeding and have been told to feed every 4 hours. He's now starting to let me know before the 4 hours he's wanting feeding. Is it advisable to make sure he goes no longer than 4 hours, or would I be okay to leave him for when he's telling me? I think, so he was born at 35+6, almost 30, so he's 38+6 now, isn't he? So he's pretty much what we'd call term. So I think if things are going well and he's gaining weight, you could let him tell you when he wants to be fed. And actually it's interesting that you say 4, because we'd normally say 3. We normally don't get babies go longer than 3 hours between feeds. So when we've got babies on the ward, we'd say, you know, a minimum of 3 hourly feeding to ensure that a baby always gets 8 feeds in 24 hours. If 4 hourly leads to 6 feeds in 24 hours, I mean, if your baby's coping with that, that's fabulous. But some babies won't. They need that nearer 8. But, you know, what we'd be looking for is to go towards responsive feeding, letting your baby tell you when they're hungry. Have it in the back of your head, you know, how long they've gone. You don't want to leave them too long. You know, if you're getting to sort of 4, 5, you know, you might want to be waking them. But definitely, you know, from the other point of view, if your baby's looking for food sooner, remember breastfeeding is way more than just food. You know, it's so much comfort for a baby. It's that closeness that they love. They love that oral satisfaction of having your breast in their mouth. They love the fact that they're that close, they're against your skin. They can smell you, they can hear you. They just adore it. You know, it's where they want to be. So Carla, I would go towards responsive feeding. Your baby's now 30, you know, over 38 weeks. So I think there's a real, you know, real chance now to move on to responsive feeding, and ensuring that you don't, you know, obviously having a safety belt, that you're not going too far, you know, too long. But if they're looking for food sooner, that's fine by our reckoning. But well done you, that's absolutely fab. We've had an absolute spate of 35 weekers recently. It's interesting, isn't it? Things come in waves, and we have had quite a few 35 weekers recently. But well, that's absolutely fantastic, and well done. Alicia's popped up that she said, as Charlotte's put up, that Alicia is still being quite fussy about her food. It comes in time. I bet if you give her an ice cream, she'd eat it. So I remember my son being given an ice cream for the first time. He couldn't get enough of it. Lucy, I'll just point out Alicia is quite old now. She's coming up 2, so, you know, and I'm not terrible suggesting an ice cream. So anyway, Lucy, she says, hi Alex, have you any tips for suspected mastitis? Does going on antibiotics mean I can't give express milk? Right, let's start with the antibiotics question. Yes, you can still give your milk. There are very few medications out there that you can't take while breastfeeding. We've even supported a mother who was sadly having to have chemotherapy, and she, because it's in cycles, she was able to give her milk between the cycles. So antibiotics, the majority of them are absolutely fine. If you're being given antibiotics, I mean, your doctor will know you've got mastitis. They know you're feeding. That's why you're going to get antibiotics. So they won't give you one that isn't good and isn't fine. There are very few medications that we need to worry about, and so little of it goes through to the baby that we don't have to. There are no concerns. So the only thing you might find is it upsets your baby's tummy a little bit, but that's nothing compared to, you know,
if we were to change what you give them. So much better they get your milk, because remember, your milk's full of probiotics as well. So your milk is repairing at the same time. You know, even if the antibiotics do upset their tummy a little bit, your milk is repairing the gut at the same time with the probiotics in it. With regard to tips for mastitis, effective milk removal. So feeding well, make sure you've got some help with positioning attachment. Make sure you've got that baby going on chin up, upper lip, just skimming the nipple, big wide mouth, on and hold. Now sometimes mastitis is because the milk is in the breast and it's not being, I'm looking for my breast, it's not being removed properly, so you end up with very clogged up ducts, and it's not an infection as such, but it feels like it. Sometimes it's mastitis because you've got damage to your nipple. Now if you've got damage to your nipple, then that is definitely going to be an indicator that actually you need help with positioning and attachment. So the first thing is make sure you get positioning and attachment sorted. Get milk removal going, and if you can take ibuprofen. So we would normally recommend 24 hours of self-help. So you could try warm, go and stand in the shower, get the milk moving if you're finding you're really congested. See if you can get the baby on, because the baby will be better than anything. Use a pump as well. Keep that milk moving. In between feeds, you could try cold compresses to make you feel better, and just keep going. It might be frequent, but just keep it moving. If it's very, very clogged, hand expressing will have the best result. And once the milk starts to flow, then you can think about the pump. But there are so many self-help things you can do. The Breastfeeding Network has a superb leaflet about mastitis. Have a peek on there. Lots of self-help stuff on there as well. So Breastfeeding Network, literally pop it into Google. It comes up. It's a really, really good resource. It's a resource that we as a team use a lot. Their leaflets are fantastic. There's loads about medications. In fact, you could look up about your antibiotics, because it will talk about it on there as well. So Breastfeeding Network, have a peek, and I think you'll find that that's really good. So I'm just scooting back up because they've shot down. So that was Lucy, wasn't it? So self-help first, look at Breastfeeding Network, and if you do have to take antibiotics, and antibiotics, even if it's non-infective mastitis, i.e. it's clogged up, but there's not an infection there, they work because they are anti-inflammatories. So that's why you start with anti-inflammatories. So have a go with that. Carla has said it was 3 hours, but community midwives advised 4. He put 6 ounces on in a week. Wow, he did very well. Okay, that's interesting. I'm surprised it said 4, because we normally say 3, but you know, it's whatever's working for your baby. And actually, really and truly, we should be moving away from 3 and 4. We should be moving towards, when does your baby want to be fed? You know, he's the one who's going to tell you. He knows when he's hungry. He knows when he wants that cuddle. And remember, feeding is there for comfort. He might be feeling a bit lonely, and you can feed. So this goes back to what we've just been talking about with mastitis. You know, there's no reason why you can't feed your baby because you want to feed. It doesn't just have to be because of the baby. That's what we mean by responsive. So responsive feeding is a two-way process. So a mother can choose to breastfeed her baby. You might be sitting there, it might be your first day at home after your partner's gone back to work, and you might be feeling a bit lonely. There's no reason why you couldn't pick your baby up and give them a cuddle and give them a feed, and that will release oxytocin in both of you, and that's really lovely. So, you know, there are lots of reasons for feeding. And what you need to be moving, you know, aiming to do, try and do now, Carla, is move to responsive feeding. Let your baby tell them when they want to be fed. You can feed your baby when you want to feed them too, if you're feeling full or whatever. She said, thank you, Carla. I'm just grateful for all the questions. We've done brilliantly today. Please keep it up. We've got a few weeks to go on my own. Charlotte said she's not like me. She loves sweet things, so I'm hoping to get her better with savoury. Or who doesn't like sweet things? I mean, there's not many. My mother, she likes cheese, but there you go. Lucy said thanks. Emma has said, oh, hello Emma. Is there a certain topic we're speaking about, or can we ask any question, please? It's feeding. We're talking about feeding, any feeding topic you want to talk about. So I'm from the infant feeding team, and that's my area of expertise. I work in the hospital, so I might know some things about the hospital if you've got a question about that. So, you know, far away, but I'm about to be one of the last questions, because I've done my hour now, even though I was a little bit late. But just looking to see if make sure I haven't missed anything. Thank you so much for all these brilliant questions. They've been great. Emma, if you want to pop a question up, I'll do my best. So stick it up there, and then we're going to call it a day after that, I think. I've got another mother I've been in clinic this morning, and I've got another mother coming this afternoon that I'm going to be seeing. So keeping myself well and truly busy. Been a bit low on the ground in staff this week, so I seem to be spread quite thinly, but quite normal. I'm just waiting to see if Emma pops a question up. Doesn't look like it. There should be the ask the matron sessions as well running. So if you've got general questions about things like our guidelines or visiting or delivery suite, etc., then those very much will come under there. So Emma has said, just going to ask, when do you recommend collecting milk before the baby arrives? I'm due in 6 weeks time and looking to breastfeed. Well done, brilliant. Emma, we would be suggesting from 37 weeks onward. We have a leaflet. If you go on to our website, we have our own page on the maternity website, OUH maternity feeding. If you literally do a Google search, OUH maternity feeding, then you'll be able to see our page, and if you scoot down the page you'll see resources. There's a link to 7 videos that are on YouTube, and one of them is about hand expressing, so go and have a look at that. And on the same web page, before you go to YouTube, is a leaflet. There's a link to a leaflet called Collecting Colostrum While You're Pregnant, and that would help you too. So we suggest from about 37 weeks onwards. We don't want there's a very, very small risk of stimulating labour with hand expressing, because you're stimulating oxytocin, and what we don't want is any more early babies. As I said, we've had a number of babies born at 35 weeks recently, and we were talking about one earlier. We don't, it's not ideal, and I'm sure that those that do have their early babies will tell you it's a little bit more challenging when they're a bit early. And you certainly don't get an early discharge. You're going to be with us for a couple of days while we just check your baby's okay and transferring milk, and it's just a bit more of a challenge when they're born a bit early. So we suggest you don't try until 37 weeks, which is what we consider as term in midwifery. Well, huge thank you to all of you for your questions. I'm really grateful for keeping it going. Between now and then, have a think about, but now and then being next Thursday, have a think about some more questions. If you've no friends who've want information or some support, then do by all means get in touch. Kezia, if you had a question, then please do call. Give me a call. You can find our number on the website. Or email me, and we can talk offline. Thank you very, very much to one and all, and a good week to you all. See you next Thursday.